Good day. My name is Billy Batayan. I will be discussing fiscal policy and recessions today. Recessions, downturn in the economy, well, they always happen, but they seem to occur at a quicker and quicker pace. Recently, we've had the Great Recession and the COVID-19 induced recession. So, when those occur, we essentially have two choices. We can simply wait for matters to resolve themselves, which they will, but of course, during that time, people will suffer and they might linger. Or we could choose to, well, act and try to resolve the issue. And when the government tries to do that, well, that's what we call fiscal policy. So let's model a recession and see what would be the best way to go about resolving it.
Okay, so let's draw a recession, which is, again, you have your graph, you have your long run aggregate supply, which is, again, the magnet towards which the economy is pulled because it reflects our capacity to produce, which is of $21 trillion. You have your short run aggregate supply, which I'm just going to write SRS. I'm not going to put the A, but you know it's the short run aggregate supply. We have our demand, and this is the only stable equilibrium. That is point A. We remember the stable equilibrium concept from when we were doing the chapter on supply and demand, because we remember that we were able to say, well, everything has to start at that point. We now have that the people from Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, really a lot more people, Europe, can't purchase our goods. So that means that there is a decrease in the demand. So that's really easy to conceptualize. And so we moved from point A to point B. That means that our production is now 17. It has decreased. This is clearly a problem. And so I'm circling it because it is a problem, but we also know that prices have gone down, but we don't think that's important because as far as the consumer is concerned, it's okay that prices go down. So this is not really a problem. So this doesn't mean prices haven't gone down. It means we're not really worried about that. And so, again, this is basically the problem that we face. This problem is called a recession because it means that our GDP has decreased. There's less production, which obviously means that unemployment is higher. Now, again, you have two possibilities. Possibility one is the economy self-adjust, which the economy will self-adjust. So you have to know that it will happen. We'll talk more about that shortly, but it will happen. The economy self-adjusts always through a shift of the supply curve. The supply curve could technically increase or decrease, but we know that in this instance, it would make no sense for the supply curve to decrease because, right, the hand is describing where the supply curve would be, and that would bring it even further from the long run aggregate supply. So we don't want to do that. So what we want to happen is, well, or what happens automatically, whether you want it or not, it's that the short run aggregate supply shifts that way, and it's the short run aggregate supply 2. And it brings us back to our long run aggregate supply curve. It brings us back to 21. Let's call this point C, right? This is point C. And maybe this is time to do a table analysis. We remember when we did the supply and demand, we did a table analysis. So we're going to do a table analysis here. You have the economy moving from point A to point B. So tell me, while we are trying to explore solution 1, when you move from point A to point B, what happens to price? Does price go up? Does price go down? So when the economy moves from point A to point B, does price go up or down?
Down.
Anyone? Down, right? When the economy moves from point A to point B, what happens to quantity? Does it go up or does it go down?
Down.
Down. Okay. So when we apply solution 1, which moves it from B to C, what happens to overall price? So really, I want to compare when you move from A to C. What happened to price? Did price go up or down when you move from A to C?
Price went down.
Okay. And when we move from A to C, what happened to quantity? Did it go up or down?
Remain the same.
It remained the same. So this seems to be kind of good because, hey, look, we had a problem that had to do with the GDP and it stays the same. So I like that. The price goes down. Well, I'm not going to say it's great or not because really that was never the issue. The issue was never price. The issue was the GDP. But I'll definitely consider it to be positive. I'm happy. Any questions so far? Okay. Well, let's look at solution 2. Solution 2 involves an equation that we've learned about before. We learned that the GDP was equal to, remember, C plus I plus G plus NX. When you let the economy adjust, you don't need any of that because it does it on its own. Nobody has to actually do anything. But you always have the alternative of saying the government is going to do a stimulus package or the government is going to decrease taxes. if the government decides to do a stimulus package, let's say build roads, remember, G increases. If the government decides to decrease your taxes or to give you a $1,200 check, you go and you spend that money, so C increases. So I'm just going to write here as an example, tax cut or stimulus. This happens when we decide to do something about it. So how would you draw the government giving you money and you spending it on the graph? How would you graph that? So guys, how would you graph? You're at point B because we have a recession, and then the government gives you $1,200 and you spend it. So how would you graph that?
Would it be another demand shift?
Exactly, right? Because I told you that GDP equation would come in handy. So you would simply increase the demand. Basically, what would happen is you would go to basically a curve that's here. I'm just going to draw like, this squiggly line. It's really superimposed with D1. So I'm still drawing that so you kind of know. You would have basically that, and you would be here. And I'm not going to just call it point A. I'm going to say, well, you know what? This is point. It's point C prime. Well, I'll keep it in blue because, right, it's the shift of the demand. So I'll call it C prime. And this is the other option. The other option, I'm going to say, I'm going to call it fiscal. Remember, fiscal policy is when the government does something. Or monetary policy, which is when the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank, does something. I'm not going to really go into everything the Fed will do because we know what happens, right? The Fed changes the reserve requirement, or it buys or it sells bonds, or it changes the discount rate so that the banks lend more money. Ultimately, there'll be more money in the economy. If there's more money in the economy, which is the money supply increasing, on that other graph, you draw an increase in the money supply. That in turn decreases the interest rate. It's not on this graph here, it's on another graph. We'll draw it next time. And when you do that, then the interest rates being down, you guys borrow more. And if you guys borrow more, then you guys spend more. Oh yeah, that comes out exactly to what we have here, which is that the demand increases. Okay, so that is fiscal. Well, what I said was monetary policy, but fiscal policy is a tax cut or a stimulus that changes the demand. So the economy always adjusts to a shift in the supply, and fiscal or monetary policy are always manifested through a shift of the demand. In this particular case, we figured that the supply increased, or if we did something for fiscal policy, the demand increased. And we are at point C prime. So why don't I do, let's see, maybe I should put C prime. Well, why don't I just do it here, right? So again, if we look, I'll put C prime here, guys. Okay, and I'll actually call this solution 2. and I'll call the other one solution 1, right? To signify this is 1, and this is solution 2. So now we're doing solution 2. We don't have to go, oh, what happens to price, what happens to quantity when you move from A to B, right? Because that's apparent, right? You can see it's the same, right? You move from A to B while you're at the same, price went down and quantity went down. Price is not a problem because price going down, that's not a problem. But the GDP going down, that's a big, big problem. But when we try to analyze things and to look at what happens when you move from A to C prime, tell me, what happened to price when you move from A to C prime? Did it up or down? When you move from A to C prime, did price go up or down? It's a trick question.
It didn't move.
Stayed the same.
Exactly, it remained the same. Now, when we move from A to C prime, what happened to quantity?
Stays the same.
It's the same. So remember, our original problem in what we term a recession, which is obvious because the GDP went down, so unemployment went up, well, it's kind of fixed there too, isn't it? Whether you do solution 1 or solution 2, you have check marks because they both fix the problem. That's perfect. But what about price? Which one is better, to be at C or be at C prime? What do you think? So would you rather have low prices or the same price? Guys, what do you prefer? Low prices or the same price?
Low prices?
Right? So I think C seems to be better than C prime because as far as quantity is concerned, they both give the same result. But as far as price is concerned, it seems that C is better than C prime. So you might think, well, then I believe that C is better. There's something else that you have to consider. The time that it takes. Why? Because this is a recession. People are actually suffering. People lost their jobs just as now. Companies are struggling to make revenues. They can go bankrupt. The longer it is, the likelier the chances that they go bankrupt. So, if you consider time only, what you always have is that when you let the economy adjust itself, it's kind of always slow. When you actually do something, it's always faster. Just imagine you're sick. You have, just, something, well, actually a sprained, muscle somewhere. So you could say, well, it's just a sprained muscle. It's not that bad. And, you just go to work on it. You walk around the house on it. You don't do anything. You just slowly let your body adjust. Since it's a small sprain, yeah, it will adjust. It will get better. And then eventually you'll just walk normally. It's just something mild. But if it's a bigger sprain and you go, well, I think maybe I have to at least put some bandages on it, maybe put some ice, maybe go to the doctor to see if it's, torn or not, and maybe they're gonna, give me like, okay, this is what you want to put on it to really, make sure it heals properly. If you do something about it, it'll be faster. So that always happens whenever you do two, so fiscal or monetary policy, it's always faster because you're actively trying to solve the problem. When you wait for the economy to adjust itself, it takes more time. but it'll eventually fix itself. The economy is exactly like that. The only problem is fiscal policy, right? A stimulus package, that costs money. If you want to do a tax cut, well, that means the government has less money in the future. It's going to cost because it's going to decrease services. Basically, doing fiscal or monetary policy has a cost. Waiting for the economy to adjust doesn't have any overt or direct cost, but people suffer for longer because it's slower. So if you have a deep and prolonged economy, it's bad. Do you think you could wait for the economy to adjust, which is going to take a lot of time? Or do you think you should do something about it and try to fix it, even though there is a cost? So
Shouldn't you?
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Shouldn't you do something about it because it'll be quicker, and in the long run it'll work out better. Because
Right.
eventually, anyway, everything's going to come back out to equilibrium over time.
Right? You go to the doctor because it's a big sprain. You're really limping. Walking on it because you have to, cook your food and do stuff. All of that makes it actually worse. And you want it to, heal properly so that it's good in the long run. But if you have something really mild, you're not going to bother making an appointment with the doctor, going over there. I mean, that's going to take, like hours. And it's really something that, it's just really minimal. Probably in 2 days, you won't even feel it. So if you have a deep recession, so I'm just going to put the word deep there, then you would want to do something about it, and then you choose solution 2. If you have a mild recession, then you go, well, maybe I'll just take solution 1. Because when you compare solution 1 and 2, right, as far as quantity is concerned or as far as the GDP is concerned, they're both the same. No one is preferable to the other. You rather have solution 1 because price is better, but having a lower price, which you have for solution 1, doesn't compensate for the fact that if the recession is bad, if the recession is deep, then you'd rather have solution 2. And so at the end of the day, if the recession is deep, you pick solution 2 because all these people that are out of a job for a long time is bad. But if the recession is mild, and I'm not going to put it there, you would rather have solution 1.
Hopefully, you found this to help to understand how the government can act when there is a recession to alleviate its effect. Of course, there are other considerations that should be integrated into your analysis, such as, well, political considerations. Is the solution that is proposed by the government something that is palatable by the voters? Or the debt level situation, which may or may not enable our government to further spend on resolving this issue? Goodbye.